My name's Jennifer Wakelin. I'm a child and adolescent psychotherapist. And I'm going to give about a 15-minute brief introduction to the Watch Me Play intervention. Then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Vaso Totsika, who's going to talk in more detail about 2 studies that we've recently completed. And we hope to have plenty of time for discussion, and all your questions will be of interest to us after that. So I think you can see the Watch Me Play logo there, and you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a link to the Watch Me Play website where resources are available to download, and on the right-hand side, an email address where you're very welcome to contact me. So we could go to the next slide, please, Vaso, which would say about Watch Me Play. So this approach involves a parent or carer watching their baby or child, and this could be from soon after a baby, very early in life, first weeks of life, aged up to around 8 years. And the parent or carer is watching the baby play for between 5 and 20 minutes, talking with the child about their play, and then talking with another adult about their child's play. And this intervention or approach aims to promote caregiver-child attunement and interaction. Some sessions will be facilitated by a trained practitioner who's joining the child, watching the child play alongside the parent, also talking with the child about their play and providing prompts, praise and encouragement to the parent, so the practitioner's talking to the child and they're talking to the parent. They're not silently watching, they're very active. And after that, they're then talking with the parent or the carer about their experience of the child's play, what they saw, what they noticed, what stood out for them, what was difficult, what they enjoyed, and so on, for around 10 or 20 minutes. Or if something is very much stirred up for the parent, for a longer time, there might be a separate session just to have that discussion with the parent. So anyone who's familiar with work with children in this age range will know that a lot of these elements are very common to other approaches, including speech and language therapy and many other approaches. There's some common elements, and there are a couple that are distinctive with this approach, which I'll go on to talk about. Basso, we could have the next slide, which is about the short guide. So you'll see here there's 5 core elements to this approach. This is taken from a short guide, which is one of the resources that's freely available for parents and for practitioners on the website. Getting started. So this is an approach that often needs some introduction. For some parents, of course, this way of being with their baby or child comes completely naturally. It's what they do spontaneously, just what happens in the family. For some parents, it's a bit new, but with a bit of explanation or just looking at some of the resources, they might say, yes, it's easy, I can do that, I can get on with that, which is great. But the parents for whom this approach is particularly targeted is parents for whom this is difficult. It's difficult to let their child play freely. It's difficult to give one-to-one attention to their child. And with these parents, we do need one or two or sometimes more sessions to explore their thoughts about the approach, prepare for it, think about what kind of toys they'll use for their child. When will they find this time? 5, 10 or 20 minutes? How is that going to work if they've got several children? So quite a bit of preparation is a core element of the approach. Letting the child take the lead in play. So in this approach, as in many others, the focus is on child-led play. And again, this is very instinctive and natural for some parents, very difficult, demanding or challenging for other parents. But the play needs to be led by the child if we're to see the changes or developments that the parent hopes to see. We won't see any change. We're unlikely to see change if the play is led by the parent. The third step, watching. This is about individual, undivided attention. And again, this is demanding, especially in our current age of distraction. Giving full attention to the child is something that many parents describe as quite transforming, but it takes a step to get there. The practitioner is there to support and encourage the parent. Talking with the child about their play, this is another core element, and talking And that might be with the baby, echoing the sounds, echoing their vocalizations, mirroring the baby's sounds or the sounds that the toddler's making, or repeating back a child's words. And many parents, again, are quite astonished by how transforming this can be for their verbal exchanges with their baby or child, and how much more the baby or child might vocalize or speak. And as I've said, those elements are core and central to many, many different ways of supporting parents with a baby or young child. The fifth element, talking with another adult about the child's play, is a bit more distinctive. So this is where the practitioner is open to, receptive to, listening to the parent, meeting the parent very much where they are at, in the same way that we hope to encourage the parent to be responsive and available, interested to their child, and picking up on where they're at. So there's a sort of concentric circle of containment, that what the parent is offered by the practitioner might be internalized and becomes available to the child from the parent. Now, another difference from other approaches, which I'm sure people are familiar with, Solihull approach, Webster Stratton, PACE, many, many different approaches, is that Watch Me Play has a very narrow focus. There's no teaching about attachment or parenting, but it's an experiential approach which aims to operationalize what we know from child development research about very powerful effects from intensive interaction between a parent or caregiver and child. That these interactions, once they get going, are tremendously reinforcing, tremendously rewarding for both parent and child, and motivating. Once parents see something or feel something is different, they can be very motivated to continue. In the next slide, I'm just going to mention a couple of things about how we started using this approach. This was with babies and young children in care, where, of course, there is a particular need to support the attunement, the capacity for age-appropriate stimulation and attachment for children who are in transition and in substitute care. So we started these evaluations some time ago, which meant that by the time we got onto the studies that Vaso is going to talk about, we did know quite a bit about the approach already, and we knew what was a priority for parents. We knew that there were parents for whom this comes naturally. We knew that there are parents who might say, well, I was doing this already, but now I know why it's important and I might prioritize it more. And we also knew that there are many parents and foster carers and adoptive parents, or parents to whom a child is being returned after a period in care, who might find it really difficult to give this one-to-one attention to their child, and could be very much supported by the practitioner being alongside them. So in the next slide, I'm just mentioning another couple of evaluations that we did that allowed us to sort of fine-tune the materials that we had, the manual for parents, and eventually the website, which you've got the link for, where we have a lot of materials which are available for parents, because one of the feedbacks that we got from parents all the time was, I wish I'd known this earlier. Everyone who's fostering or adopting should have this information. We didn't know this. Why not? And of course, a lot of this information about child-led play and so on is very, very well known in the early years sector, but it's not at all well known to many parents. And then moving on to the next slide, this is about a couple of recent professional doctorates, which are focusing more on Watch Me Play being used as part of assessment or treatment for children with emerging autism. This is an area where there's been a lot of interest in the Watch Me Play approach more recently. Is my next slide, Vaso, which professionals use Watch Me Play? So I've got a slight glitch with my system and I can't actually see the slides.
It's on now, Jennifer.
Is it which professionals?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. So this is just an illustration of the range of different professionals. Watch Me Play is not therapy. There's no interpretation. There's no... All that the practitioner is doing is being alongside the parent, describing to the child's play, commenting on the child's play, encouraging the parent to comment in that way, providing encouragement and support to the parent, and having a discussion with the parent. So a wide range of practitioners use this approach, including perinatal nursery nurses, a range of clinical psychologists, and so on. So approach is quite flexible in the sense of who can provide it. But what we do find is that many professionals do say they benefit from training, which I think could be the next slide, Vaso. So the training is in 2 parts. It's an introduction, which currently we're doing in 3 90-minute sessions. And then it's followed by work discussion or small supervision groups meeting once a month. And this is a way of providing to professionals who may often not have this within their work settings, a supervision around reflective practice, which of course is essential when we're working with troubled families or families where there's difficulties, or just around the very turbulent emotions that there can be around babies and young children. So that is the training format that we have at the moment. It's all the training is online, and around 500 professionals have trained in the last few years, mainly in this country, but also in some other countries. I think that's probably about my last slide. The last one might be feasibility studies, Vaso, and this is what you're going to talk about in more detail.
Yes, so I suppose I will stop sharing this slide and I will put up my slides.
Thank you very much, Vaso.
Great, can you see this slide? Yeah, lovely. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vaso Totsiga. I will be talking about 2 feasibility studies that Jennifer and I have been doing over the past few years. They're all about establishing the feasibility of Watch Me Play as an intervention that's potentially helpful to young children at risk of developing mental health problems. So it was, I think, back in 2020, Jennifer, when I approached you. I'm a researcher in the field of developmental disabilities, and I was coming at the end of a substantial piece of work combining epidemiology and developmental psychology and trying to understand pathways within families that contribute to the development and maintenance of mental health problems in children with developmental disabilities. And as the evidence was suggesting that parent-child relationship quality was an important part of that pathway, I was very interested in trying to find interventions that support relationships between parents and children. And a colleague spoke to me about Watch Me Play, and we met, Jennifer, if you remember, 2020 during lockdown, virtually, of course. And we started this work with Watch Me Play being a newly manualized intervention, really, because as you've seen from Jennifer's descriptions, it has been developed over the course of a number of years. But at that time, it was just being brought together in a revamped manual. So I'm going to describe those studies in a little bit of detail and give you a sense of where we are at the evidence, where we are with the evidence base at the moment. But before I do that, I just wanted to give you a sense of, what we expect when we develop new interventions and we want to move across the phases of testing them to get to the point where we are able to confidently say, this works, this is an effective intervention. This is a visual representation of the various stages of testing, and where we are at the moment, we're very much at the stage of the feasibility, the initial stages of testing. Phase 1, early human trials, says the Thornick of the process here. But the questions that we can ask at this stage is whether the intervention can be delivered as intended, as a packaged, manualized approach, whether we can evaluate it, and whether it is acceptable to the people that delivered and the people who receive this intervention. So who are those children at risk of mental health problems? One very big category of children are children with developmental delays. These are children who experience delays in some aspect of their development, in several aspects of their development, actually in the early years. And And some will go on to have specific diagnosis, and for some, delays are going to be resolved. But we do know that they are at higher risk of behavior problems or mental health problems. And we also have evidence that they experience what is known as insecure or disorganized attachment, or in other words, that the quality of their parent-child relationship is more negative and less positive. So there is a need for interventions that support parent-child relationship quality. And in turn, they may support a number of developmental outcomes in children. I'm not going to make the case for early intervention. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the need to intervene early. And we do have some evidence now that when interventions do target directly or indirectly parent-child relationship quality in families of young children with developmental delays, they can improve that relationship quality, and they can also improve a range of children's outcomes. What we also have as a backdrop in the UK is a very high level of unmet need, where the vast majority of families report at least one unmet need for early support and early intervention. And very, very few families, fewer than 20%, according to a recent study that we did a few years ago, have accessed any early intervention for their young children with developmental delays. So there's a need to increase access to early intervention and the need to increase the evidence base for such approaches. So with that in mind, we designed our first feasibility study with families of young children with a developmental delay. And the question that we wanted to ask was whether it was feasible to offer Watch Me Play remotely to this group of parents. So I said earlier about the need to increase access, and offering support without the need to bring families into a setting for one-to-one work is considered important, an important way of increasing access to support, increasing access to interventions. We also wanted to ask whether it's feasible to evaluate Watch Me Play when it's offered in this way, whether it is acceptable to this group of parents, and we wanted to see the direction of change for outcomes that the logic model behind Watch Me Play, the theory of change, suggests should change. We recruited primarily through charities that support children, families of children with developmental delay. So we trial to offer Watch Me Play as a universal, if you'd like, a public health approach, a universal intervention. We recruited families of children between the ages of 0 and 6. They could have a developmental delay, or they could be going through assessment. We specified that over a period of 5 weeks, the families would have 5 sessions facilitated by a trained Watch Me Play practitioner once a week, and that there was an expectation that they do at least 2 sessions of Watch Me Play with their child every week. So we collected data before they started Watch Me Play, and we collected data approximately 8 weeks later. And we had some input from a parent advisory group. We collected quantitative data on recruitment and retention to the study, on whether families completed those sessions of Watch Me Play, whether they completed outcome measures, and which ones of those showed any evidence of change. We also collected qualitative data on the acceptability of the approach, the feasibility of the approach, including barriers and facilitators, and the acceptability of the evaluations of the study. And you can see on your right-hand side all the measures that we collected, and they were collected on the basis of what we understand the theory of change behind Watch Me Play is. So very similar to a number of other approaches. We advertised to thousands of studies. We don't have an exact thousands of families, we don't have an exact number because we recruited via charities that have thousands of members associated with them. And 38 parents got in touch with us to say, I'm interested in the study. And 15 of those consented. So that translated to a recruitment rate of 39.5%. And of those 15, 12 completed follow-up data, so an 80% retention rate. And as you can see, and as you probably suspect, most of the parents were female parents. Most of the children were male children, so boys, approximately 3 years old. And they had a range of diagnoses, or they were undergoing diagnosis for various neurodevelopmental conditions. They also had an adaptive behavior functioning that was clearly within the range of significant disability. 4 participants did not complete the intervention. They dropped out, and they said they were struggling for time, or they were struggling to find childcare for the siblings, or their target child was unwell. 53 participants managed to complete the intervention, and by complete here we mean complete 10 sessions, all the facilitated ones, and at least one session independently done every week. They managed to complete it within the 5 weeks we expected them to complete it, but actually 73% of families managed to complete it at 7 weeks, so they needed a little bit longer. I'm not going to go through all this data, but I just wanted to share with you how out of all of the things that we measured, the ones that showed more evidence of change were children's outcomes, and in particular, emotional and behavior problems, social skills, but also communication. So a substantial part of the participant group experienced what is known as clinically significant change. Parents identified environmental distraction, so things that were happening in their home at the same time as they were trying to do Watch Me Play. They kind of interfered with doing Watch Me Play remotely. They struggled to do the sessions because they had no childcare for the sibling. And sometimes a barrier to doing Watch Me Play was the fact that they were expecting that their child wasn't really able to participate in this approach. And that was true mostly at the beginning, before they started experiencing the positive benefits, as Jennifer said. However, the fact that it was offered and supported remotely was a facilitator. And actually, the vast majority of parents said that they wouldn't have done this if it was face-to-face, because they could fit it in around their other responsibilities. They really appreciated the regular practitioner feedback, that weekly contact and support to do Watch Me Play. And then when they experienced the benefit, when they were seeing that their child was benefiting, their attitudes towards Watch Me Play changed. They became more positive, and that's what kept them going to continue doing Watch Me Play. We coded acceptability across this very complex framework that codes each dimension of acceptability. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'm happy to discuss any specific dimensions. But just to say, acceptability of Watch Me Play was very high across this group of parents. A couple of things that are worth highlighting, I suppose, is that when we're looking at this group of children with additional needs, a couple of benefits of Watch Me Play that we hadn't thought of, but the parents brought to our attention, is the fact that parents started noticing their child more. They started noticing the things that the child can do, as opposed to the things that the child cannot do. And with that noticing, with that awareness, if you'd like, came greater acceptance. And I think these are really interesting and important findings. In the second study, we expanded, if you would like, our investigation into early years and children's services. Now, this is secondary care. People can be referred to those services by other professionals, or sometimes they can self-refer. And when families get referred to those services, it is mostly because there are concerns about developmental delay, or there are concerns about the relationship between the baby, the child and the parent, or mental health. And we knew from some work that we did before we started this study that approximately 50% of children referred to those services have a developmental delay, and about a third of them have contact with social care. So it's a complex, so the families that get referred to those services experience some needs. And it is important that, those needs get addressed at that stage, because if mental health problems are allowed to perpetuate, if you'd like, there's a very small number of children who actually manage to get access to specialist health later on. So those opportunities for prevention and early intervention are indeed crucial. These are the questions we asked again, and they were again feasibility questions. So can we recruit families? Do they stay with the study? Do they engage with intervention? Can we deliver it with fidelity? As in, are the sessions being delivered as they should be? Is it acceptable to this group? Is it acceptable to this setting, to the clinical staff? And what is the cost of delivering Watch Me Play? We aim to recruit 40 families across 15 clinical sites from all over the UK. We expanded slightly the age range of eligible children from 0 to 8 because we realized that there is absolutely no reason why this approach doesn't work with slightly older children, especially when you're looking at children with additional needs, where there's still very much, it feels very much okay to still be playing at a later age. Again, we used a mixed methods design with measures completed at baseline and a 3 months follow-up. We interviewed parents, but we also interviewed clinical staff. Now, out of that target of 40, the clinical sites contacted 37 participants from at various phases of contact with the service. And of those, 21 consented to participate in the study, and 20 were screened eligible. So the recruitment rate for this study was a bit higher, at 57%. And if you follow the flow chart, you'll see that some of them, about 60% of them, stayed with the study at follow-up. So a slightly lower retention rate here. And the profile of the children and of the families was very similar. About 70% of the children had a developmental disability or a learning disability, about 65% were autistic, and about 35% of them had contact with social services. Do they engage with Watch Me Play, those families? We only managed to collect data from 5 families, but they all did. 80% of them had completed those 10 sessions that we defined as completion. And actually they had done the 5 facilitated sessions and approximately 11 sessions by themselves. Can we deliver Watch Me Play with fidelity? Yes, we can. We collected fidelity data across loads of sessions, 52 sessions, and we scored them, and they had all been delivered with fidelity. And as this practitioner says here, it didn't only help from a research perspective, but it helped from a clinical perspective, because those checklists that we were asking participants practitioners to complete after each session helped bring back to their mind, helped remind them of the session, or help prepare them for the session in such a way that they found it helpful. Was it acceptable? It was acceptable. They found it a positive experience, but it is worth highlighting that some parents said that online worked perfectly for my child. It works really well for my child to be at home in the familiar environment. whereas other families said, online, that's not for my child. In this particular example here, a parent says my child is autistic, and if it was face-to-face, definitely for us, but online, no, it's not working for my child. What about staff? Staff did seem to suggest that it worked online. They were initially not particularly keen, but then they tried it and it worked for them. Again, some of them suggested that they experienced technical difficulties, sometimes with technology, where the parent could connect and they were not there to help them. I should mention that we were making allowances for people to do it in person, face-to-face, in people's houses, if online wasn't working for them. It wasn't, compulsory that it's all done online. And the final question was about the cost. Now, we estimated the cost as approximately something between £209 and £495. This isn't particularly informative at the moment, but it is important for the next stage of research. I suppose the one thing to mention is that the cost seems to be comparable with other approaches, the cost per session, and possibly maybe a little bit on the lower side, so comparable with approaches that are for children of the same age range, or approaches that are again one-to-one and deliver remotely, and so on. But this is helpful for us to use as a way to design future research. There is no way, of course, that we can determine any cost effectiveness at this stage. This is a preliminary piece of information that we need to go on and design the next study. So overall, recruitment seemed to work better when Watch Me Play is offered as a targeted prevention, and that's probably understandable because, clinicians know the families better and they can say, oh, I think you would benefit, or I think I know some families who would benefit from this approach. However, retention seems to work better when it's offered as a universal intervention, and it could be that families who are referred to services are experiencing more difficulties and find it harder to commit to doing the full thing. We have evidence now that, more or less, most families can complete Watch Me Play as we expect them to do so, but they might need a slightly longer time frame, not just 5 weeks, a little bit longer. They do experience challenges, and especially with health. We do have evidence that this hybrid form, where it's mostly done remotely with allowance for some face-to-face meetings, is both acceptable and helpful. And the key thing, I think, the key message we're getting from the data is that flexibility is really crucial for these families. And the next step for us as a research team is to really move on with testing the feasibility of randomization now in a feasibility randomized controlled trial. And I think that's where we would like to go in the next couple of years. Right, okay. I'll stop sharing now, and then we can have some questions.